Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Over the weekend, we saw the finales of a couple NHL conference playoff series, and it is going to be the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers facing off in the Stanley Cup Finals. The puck drops on Saturday to officially kick off this series, but want to go over some of what we saw over the weekend that put these teams in this position. So it was both of these teams finishing it off in Game 6 was an unbelievable conference finals from the perspective of both of these series in an entertainment standpoint. So that was, really encouraging to see that it was an elite Final Four, and now we have, very possibly the two best teams in the NHL facing off against one another. The Panthers going back to the finals for the second straight year, while the Oilers in this curse around them and really Canadian franchises when you look at the history of the past, 20 plus years of the success Canadian teams have had in the playoffs, that they are back in the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time since 2006. So, starting briefly here with the Panthers, they finished off the Rangers on Saturday night with a 2-1 win. There was definitely a clear sort of, I would say to some degree, solidarity of they understood that this was, last year it was a celebration for winning the Eastern Conference, and they were riding this extreme high. This year, happy to be there, but they also understand that the job is most certainly not finished, and they learned that the hard way last year against the Vegas Golden Knights when they lost. But very quickly here as well, on the note of the Rangers, great season for them. The President's Cup trophy curse, though, does live on, where they had the most points in the regular season, and it seemed like they were in a very good position to come out of the Eastern Conference this season, but they were unable to do so. Igor Shesterkin was unbelievable for them through their first few games. You can, make an argument that he basically put together the performances in goal in games 2 and 3 that he almost helped the Rangers steal those games, both of which coming in overtime. And it was, really encouraging to see. But then on the other end, we've seen Bobrovsky and the dominance that he's been able to put together. And in large part, Bobrovsky, he's been incredible. Now, it's, I guess, sort of this stupid idea of like a blame pie. How do you want to sort of divvy up who is responsible for all of this? Because we know the Panthers, their forecheck, the style that they play with their physicality and aggression, that they do make things extremely difficult for opposing teams to really dominate the time of possession in the offensive zone and such, and that was part of it. So give credit to the other players on the Panthers. The Rangers, to some degree, Zibanejad and company, to have that sort of fall off in production was definitely disheartening for them. But again, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to Bobrovsky, who was just incredible throughout this series, and it's definitely going to be the number one advantage, I would say, for the Panthers heading into next series, is the goaltender matchup between Sergei Bobrovsky and Stuart Skinner. Now, Skinner, I've been a little bit critical of him throughout this postseason run, but he put together maybe his best game, at least, in the biggest game this past weekend in their closeout. But sort of, before we move on to that series, just the Panthers, they're not everybody's favorite team. They're definitely not my favorite team as a Bruins fan, but I mean, the brand of hockey that they play with that physicality and everything, it is very fun to watch. And, ultimately, I'm going to be rooting for the Oilers because of a little bit of the bias in me, but the Panthers were my pick to win the Stanley Cup Finals, and from a prediction standpoint, I feel like I kind of have to stick with that, but just know I am going to be rooting for the Oilers. And it's not just pure out of, discontent as a Bruins fan. The Oilers are such a fun and inspiring franchise from pretty much every perspective. First off, the atmosphere in Edmonton, something that has to be on my bucket list, and I'm sure there are some of the other, top end, if the Maple Leafs could ever sort of actually come through in big moments. We know how diehard their fans are, but haven't necessarily seen the postseason success to fully experience that atmosphere on the biggest stage. But I have been blown away by how awesome it looks in Edmonton from a fan perspective, and the fact that it was not a very pretty start for them in Game 6 against the Stars, but they were sticking in it the entire time, and ultimately I do think that, the fans do deserve a little bit of credit there, where we've seen, hockey especially, but in professional sports in general now, it feels like we are seeing less and less importance of home, field, court, ice advantage, whatever you want to say. But last night definitely felt like the Oilers had the one-up because they had the fans at their backs. And, like I mentioned, it's every part of this franchise that I think is just so enjoyable. And, a big moment for the NHL as a whole, with Connor McDavid finally making his first the Stanley Cup Finals appearance, being a 3-time Hart Memorial winner, 6-time All-Star, 5-time Art Ross Trophy winner. He has racked up accolade on accolade, even beyond those. And we saw last night, when his team was in a bind, it was him in that first period getting to work that put them up and allowed them to sort of cruise throughout the rest of the game, where his first goal was just an absolute thing of beauty, weaving outside and back in of multiple Dallas defenders and putting it up in the top right. And then in the second goal that they scored, both of these coming on the power play as well, by the way, which is a massive part of Edmonton, is their special teams. And their power play had gotten off to a pretty slow start through the first 4 or so games of this series, but definitely saw that spark come back where, after, again, a filthy move from McDavid just a few minutes prior, McDavid going down the left side of the ice drew that extra attention, and he was able to dump it into Hyman, who scored from the slot, extended his range maybe a little bit more than he is typically known for, and the Oilers end up using those 2 goals as the lead to be able to close out the Stars. The Stars did score late in this game as well, but ultimately it's the Oilers moving on. And again, I just think that understanding sort of the dynamics of this past game, the fewest shots ever in a conference finals closeout game to win for them. Only 10 shots on net they got, and yet again they scored on 2 of them. McDavid on the first opportunity, and then Hyman a couple possessions later. But the record prior to that for the least shots on goal for a conference finals winning team was 17. So smash that record. The worst shot differential for a winning team in a closeout conference championship at -23. And again, it was Connor McDavid leading the way, that power play that we know can be dominant. And also, on the other end, as much as you want to talk about, point differential, Stuart Skinner, who has been very much questioned throughout this postseason run, stepped up in a massive way with 33 saves. So, was really impressive for him. He is somebody who is going to need to be locked in if they want to have a shot against the Panthers this series, because we know how dangerous that team can be. And, if this were to go into a shootout per se between the Oilers and Panthers, obviously not the actual act of a shootout, but in terms of if these are going to be offense-heavy games, I definitely feel like that favors the Panthers, knowing Bobrovsky. You can argue just out-dueled Igor Shesterkin, possibly the best goaltender in the NHL, so it's going to be really interesting to see Vegas currently has, according to DraftKings at least, is what I'm looking at right now, the Panthers as minus 130 favorites for this series, Oilers plus 110. So, again, this should be an extremely compelling series. I'm thrilled that we're going to get to see Connor McDavid on this big stage because, our big boss here at the GSMC Sports Network, Andrew Tate, he has been a little bit of a hesitant hockey enjoyer, but, if Connor McDavid can continue to, play the way that he has been, and, as much as I highlighted the goal and the assists that he had, it's the other stuff too, the hustle plays that he makes, extremely active with his stick, elsewhere and creating those extra chances as well. I mean, he is just tremendous all around. He had the play on defense that helped the Oilers get up the ice to actually draw that first penalty as well. So again, he just does everything for them, and I'm glad that I think the reason why NHL does struggle ratings-wise to some degree is the marketability of some of their stars, but now we're going to have Connor McDavid on the biggest stage, and should be a very fun matchup. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I'm not going to make an official prediction right now, sort of similar to NBA. I'm going to wait a little bit. My lean is definitely with the Panthers right now, but I'm hoping we see an Edmonton championship. But again, give me all of your thoughts in the comments section. We're going to be taking our final break of the show, though, and when we come back on the other side, I want to run through some storylines for NBA free agency this offseason. So stick with us, and we will be right back with our final segment after this quick break.